Albert whistled cheerfully as he walked his dog along the footpath that led to the stream, as was his morning routine. It was another nice morning. The sun felt just right as it hit his skin. But for some reason, he had a weird feeling in his stomach, something he couldn't place his finger on. He ignored the feeling and went on to enjoy the fresh morning air. As he made a turn in the footpath that met the stream, something strange caught his eye. He noticed a gunny bag in the middle of the stream. Something deep within him told him this could not be good. He tied his dog up in the nearby thicket and went to inspect the strangeness. He found a stick in the thicket and made his way to the stream, where he began to prod the bag, trying to make out what its contents were. After a few minutes, he could tell from the bloodstains on the bag that it was a human body. He immediately called the police, who came after about 10 minutes. And just as they had feared, the contents of the gunny were indeed the body of a young woman. Her hands and legs had been tied by cords. On close examination, there were multiple stab wounds on her stomach, face, and chest. Nobody knew who she was, and no one could tell how long she had been dead, but she must have been thrown in during the night. The police took the body away in order to begin investigations and hopefully find who was responsible for this heinous crime. Other pieces of evidence were taken from the scene, and after asking Albert and his neighbors a few questions, the police then left the area and went to begin work around solving the case. After a lengthy autopsy that involved drawing of different samples in an attempt to get to the bottom of the case, there was not much to be used in way of evidence to help in solving the case, and so it eventually grew cold. Albert was traumatized by what he had seen and stopped walking his dog down the path. In any case, the police sealed the area off for a few weeks in order to complete their investigations. The neighborhood was shocked, and the incident was in the news for a while. But before long, it was talked about less and less since the police had not found the killer and did not seem to have any more progress made concerning the case. About 9 months later, it so happened that a new officer in charge was posted in the area, and his name was Lieutenant Nelson. He took a keen interest in the cold cases on his docket, and since there were not many, the case of the young woman whose body had been found in a gunny in the stream came to the top almost immediately. It was a strange one, and the lieutenant had not seen anything like it since he joined the force as a young man. So he studied the file of evidence and photos for a day before hitting the ground. From studying the evidence, he took a keen interest in the dress the victim had been wearing. It looked like a design from the popular Dress by Rose, but the officer in charge of the investigation had recorded the design as Dress by Pose. So he quickly went online, and for sure there was a design company called Dress by Rose. He even saw a dress that looked like the victim's on the company online store. It had been on sale 10 months ago. The investigation was about to get technical. Interrogating people did not work because nobody knew the lady. So Lieutenant Nelson had to resort to other ways to solve the case. Some puzzle it was going to be, but he loved a challenge. He quickly contacted the design company and explained who he was, and then requested the data of all buyers of the dress within the country in the half-year period before the crime had been committed. He was given a huge database of names, numbers, and emails of people who had purchased a dress similar to the one under investigation. The dress was clearly popular because the search presented over 2,000 buyers. He then had to narrow them down to just one name and number, and that would lead to the identity of the girl, or better yet, the killer. The next thing Lieutenant Nelson did was reach out to the different mobile companies whose customers were present in the database. He asked for dump data of numbers that were active within the space of 2 weeks around the time the body was found. The dump data was such a huge database, but he was determined. So he got together a data science team to go through the information that he had been given. After 3 days, the data scientists narrowed it down to one number whose owner was over 60 miles from where they were. That was the strangest thing he had come across. What did a person so far away have to do with all this? Even though it had taken them a relatively long time to get a match, it was too soon to celebrate. To his surprise, the number belonged to a man. This case was becoming all the stranger. The man's name was Paul McCoy, an ex-military who owned a security company. The lieutenant then prepared to pay him a visit. He got his address from the online store. It was the same one they delivered the dress at. When Nelson got to Paul's house, and after they exchanged niceties, he decided to get straight to the point. So, I am here because your contact was the only one in 2 databases that was linked to a certain dress that was purchased online, Lieutenant Nelson said as he removed a photograph from his pocket. I'm really sorry to show you a picture of a dead girl, but do you know her? Asked Lieutenant Nelson as he closely observed Paul's reaction. Paul was quiet for some time. He attempted to hide his feelings, but instead, the sad look on his face gave him away. Odd behavior for an ex-military, thought Lieutenant Nelson. She's called Lindsay, Paul said. She and I first met soon after I left the military. That was 3 years ago, and she was 23 years then. He then became quiet. He handed the photo back to Nelson, then reached for his phone. This is her when she was alive. He handed Nelson the phone. Nelson went through her photos. What was the nature of your relationship, and might you know what could have happened to her? Nelson asked. Paul took a deep breath and went on to explain how he and Lindsay were involved in a web of complicated relationships that was doomed to fail from the beginning. See, Paul was married with 2 children. Sadly, years of being away from his family on tours with the army led to an unexpected estrangement from his wife, Amber. When he left the army, he never quite settled back into a normal life, and the fights between him and his wife got worse every passing day. It was around this time that he met Lindsay, and she was the perfect woman in his eyes. They understood each other really well, and she was his solace. He found a deep sense of calm and peace with her in the midst of all the internal chaos he was dealing with. But as it goes with these stories, Amber got to know about Lindsay. It was from then on that everything began to take a nasty trip downhill. Although they had problems, Amber could not countenance the fact that Paul had actually abandoned his family for another woman. Surely there was nothing they could not resolve by talking. Walking away was not the answer. She had a confrontation with Paul that yielded no solution, and that is when she decided she would get her husband back no matter what it took. She spoke to her brother, Andrew, about it and recounted the deep sorrow and pain Lindsay had apparently brought into her life. Even with Andrew's repeated encouragement pushing her into the direction of letting Paul go, she was adamant that this was not the option. She had nowhere to go, she said, and that left only one option in her mind. If Paul was untouchable, then Lindsay had to be taken out of the equation. For some strange reason, she managed to convince Andrew to help her carry out this evil plan of hers. And so, the stalking began. She followed Lindsay and Paul and found a pattern in their routine. She then got information that she would be going for a concert that was due to happen a fortnight later. This presented the perfect opportunity for her since she would not be going with Paul. At some point during the concert, Lindsay left her friends and made her way to the restrooms. That was the last time they set eyes on her. Amber followed her to the restrooms, which had been placed isolated on the other side of the concert park. When she came face to face with Lindsay, she pressed a gun at her side and told her not to make a sound and follow her. Terrified, Lindsay did as she was told. They walked together to the truck that was waiting a distance from the concert venue. As Amber was armed, she had not used the designated access routes to get into the grounds. She had come in through an unmanned thicket on the far end of the concert area. They got into the truck where Andrew was waiting for them. He drove off to nowhere. They wanted to get as far away as possible from the area and then carry out their evil plan. Surprisingly, Amber did not say a word. Andrew found this strange. After about 50 miles of driving, Amber told Andrew to stop. She got out of the truck and pulled Lindsay out by her hair. She told her to get on her knees. She then got cords from the back of the truck and tied Lindsay's hands and feet. She proceeded to stab her multiple times while yelling that she had messed up with the wrong one. In all truth, she did not stand a chance against all this rage. Andrew stood there and watched it all go down. After the murder, the 2 siblings then placed Lindsay's body in the gunny bag and drove around looking for where they could dump the body. It was then that Andrew had a recollection of there being a stream in the area. He drove ahead for about 10 minutes and stopped the truck. He and his sister then carried the body from the truck and walked down a footpath that led to the stream. They then threw the body into the water, and since it was shallow, Andrew stepped in and dragged the body to the middle of the stream. They then left and headed back to their hometown in the hope that the crime they had committed was far enough for them not to catch up with them. When they got home, Amber called her husband and asked to see him so they could talk. She went ahead to tell him everything that had happened. Shocked as he was, he decided against calling the police because he did not want Amber to be taken away from their children until the day Lieutenant Nelson came knocking at his door. It was almost like a relief for him. He would finally be able to let this weight off his back. Amber, Andrew, and Paul were all arrested. Amber and Andrew confessed to the first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit the murder of Lindsay and was sentenced to life terms without parole. Paul was given a 2-year sentence for obstruction of justice since he kept silent about this crime. His cooperation with the police helped in this judgment.